Hello everyone, welcome back to Agri Farming. Today we are back with sericulture or silkworm rearing in India. Sericulture is an agro-industry which means combining both agriculture and industry. The final product is silk. It is a labor-intensive activity and is provide direct and indirect employment to a larger number of people. India has a unique distinction of producing all the four varieties of silk, namely MULBERRY, MUGA, TASAR, and Agri. About 14% of the global raw silk is produced in India, of which more than 50% of MULBERRY silk mostly produced in Karnataka. Besides meeting the ever-growing domestic demand, silk in its various forms is also exported, and this sector is one of the important foreign exchange earners for the country. Sericulture or silk farming is the cultivation of silkworms to produce silk. Although there are several commercial species of silkworms, Bombyx mori, the caterpillar of the domestic silk moth, is the most widely used and intensively studied silkworm. Silk was believed to have first been produced in China. Sericulture has become an important cottage industry in countries such as Brazil, China, France, India, Italy, Japan, Korea, and Russia. Today, China and India are the two main producers with more than 60% of the world's annual production. Now, let's get into the types of silk. Moths belonging to families Cetumidae and Bombycidae of order Lepidoptera and class Insecta produce silk of commerce. There are some species and many species of silk moth which can produce the silk of commerce, but only few have been exploited by man for the purpose. Mainly, four types of silk have been recognized which was secreted by different species of silkworms. The first one is mulberry silk. This silk is supposed to be superior in quality to the other types due to its shining and creamy white color. It is secreted by caterpillar of Bombyx mori which feeds on mulberry leaves. The second is Tasar silk. It is secreted by caterpillars of Anthrea melita, Anthrea paphia, Anthrea royale, Anthrea pernee, etc. This silk is of coppery color. They feed on the leaves of arjun, asan, sal, oak, and various other secondary food plants. The third silk is Agri silk. It is produced by caterpillars of Attacus ricini, which feed on castor leaves. Its color is also creamy white like mulberry silk, but is less shining than the latter. The last but not the least silk is MUGA silk. It is obtained from caterpillars of Anthrea asama, which feeds on som, champa, and moyangkuri. Now, let's get into the different types of processes for rearing different silk. The first, let's see mulberry silk rearing. 95% of the world's silk production is mulberry. This silk comes from the silkworms of the moth Bombyx mori that feed on the leaves of mulberry plant, Morus indica. Mulberry plants are perennial bushes with wide spreading branches. They are specially cultivated, manured, and cared for to provide food for the silkworms. Mulberry silkworm rearing needs space, equipment, the right temperature, and stable humidity conditions. Therefore, special rearing houses are constructed to ensure that these conditions are met. Silkworms may be reared on shelves of rearing trays arranged in tiers that may number up to 10. This is the most economical method as the trays are placed in a vertical arrangement which allows for more eggs to be placed in a limited space. Another method is chute rearing, which can accommodate up to 2 to 3 tiers of certain dimensions. Then there is the floor method where the silkworms are reared on a raised platform right on the floor itself. Mulberry leaves are harvested and chopped into fine pieces to feed the larvae. Silkworms are voracious and finicky eaters, so great care is taken to feed them with the right leaves depending upon their maturity. Leaves should not be wet, and younger worms need more tender leaves. So, how do we reel degumming and twisting? The worms are killed usually by boiling or by stifling with hot air in a chamber, and then the threads are reeled. At this stage, the threads are untwisted and still contains sericin, a protein that coats the thread. This is still a raw silk thread. To remove the sericin, cocoons are loosened by boiling. The floss that forms is removed and filament ends are gathered and twisted. Once the threads are removed of sericin and the threads are twisted, the raw silk becomes silk yarn, which is then made into skeins and hanks. MUGA silk. MUGA silk is unique to Northeast India where it is originated. The MUGA silkworm is called Anthrea asama, and MUGA yarn has a rich golden or light brown color, which is why it is called the golden thread. Even today, MUGA is the monopoly of Northeast India, particularly Assam and Meghalaya. MUGA rearing is the toughest of all types of rearing because it has to be done outdoors on the trees themselves. Only during the egg-laying process, rearing is done indoors on small sticks or sun grasses. Once the egg hatch, the tiny worms are fed with water and tender plant leaves and are taken outdoor of the fruit trees. This is the Som or Mucilus bombicina tree. Placed at the foot of the trees, the larvae then crawl up and eat the tree leaves. As they grow in the size, they molt 4 times bigger. Rearing MUGA silkworms is fraught with problems like weather, temperature, predators such as birds, lizards, and disasters like forest fires and cyclones. The rearers have had their handful of time. Like other larvae, MUGA silkworms eat voraciously. 1,000 silkworms need 1 big tree or 2 medium-sized trees during their entire larval period. Once they mature, they crawl down to the foot of the tree and start spinning their cocoons. Rearers then collect them and place them in baskets of dry leaves, allowing them to complete their cocoon spinning process. It takes 7 to 10 days of spinning before the larvae become pupae. In summer, they remain in the pupa stage for early 3 weeks. In winter, it can take up to 2 months. Before the pupa emerge out of the cocoon and metamorphose into a silk moth, they are stifled by boiling or heating to prevent them from cutting the cocoons. The mulberry silk. This makes it possible to reel in the thread, otherwise filaments from cut cocoons cannot be reeled. MUGA reeling. Reeling MUGA is very labor-intensive activity requiring at least 2 persons. Depending upon the size of the thread desired, the number of cocoons are taken. One person pulls the filament out and hands over to the other person on the opposite side who sits next to the traditional beer, primitive equipment for twisting thread and reeling yarn. It takes these 2 people and tedious 8 hours a day to reel 500 cocoons to produce 100 grams of yarn. This crude method is slowly being replaced by motorized equipment for more efficient reeling. The next is Agri silk rearing. The Agri silkworm is easier to rear than mulberry and MUGA silkworms. The rearing is done indoors where certain conditions are maintained. The worms require an ambient temperature of around 27 degrees Celsius and relative humidity of around 70%, adequate ventilation with adequate lighting, and protection of insects, pests, and fires have to be ensured. Having sufficient provision of food plant leaves for the silkworms is important. The most common food leaves of the Agri silkworm are the castor plant, Ricinus communis. As soon as the worms hatch, they begin feeding. The young worms are fed tender leaves. In later stages, the leaves are adjusted according to the maturity of the worms. The larval period can last 17 to 45 days depending on the type of food given and the season of rearing. Rearers collect the castor leaves on bundles of bamboo poles. They replenish the leaves with water about 4 times a day. Cocooning process takes 3 to 5 days to finish. They are ready to harvest within 7 to 11 days depending on the season, winter being the longest. Eri spinning. Unlike other silks, eri thread is never reeled but it's spun like cotton. Eri silkworms are also never killed. They cut the cocoons themselves or are taken out by hand. The cocoons are then boiled in alkaline solutions and then worked with fingers for extraction. They are then washed in hot water to remove the alkali, after which they flatten and dried it the sun. Finally, spinning is done using simple traditional takli and spinning wheel or chakra. The next is TASAR silkworm rearing. TASAR silkworm produces TASAR silk having massive demand in international market. Its rearing is carried out in outdoor conditions and during course of 1 to 3rd instar rearing, a major proportion of larvae die due to vagaries of nature, pests and predators, etc., which considerably affects the production and productivity. The solution to this major bottleneck of the silkworm rearing lies in evolving a suitable TASAR silkworm feed for young-age TASAR silkworm. In present study, comparative evaluation was done among semi-synthetic diet feed, fresh leaf feed indoor reared, and fresh leaf fed in natural outdoor reared insects. Let's see the life cycle of silkworm. The life cycle of silk moth starts when a female silk moth lays eggs. The caterpillar or larvae are hatched from the eggs of silk moth. The silkworms fed on mulberry leaves or other plants and give rise to pupa. In the pupa stage, a weave is knitted around by the silkworm to hold itself. After that, it swings its head, spinning a fiber made of protein and becomes a silk fiber. Several caterpillars form a protective layer around pupa and its covering is known as cocoon. The silk thread or yarn is obtained from the silk moth cocoon. First stage is egg. An egg is first stage of the life cycle of silkworm. The egg is laid by female moth which is mostly the size of small dots. The second stage is silkworm. The hairy silkworm arises after the eggs crack. In this stage of silkworm, the growth happens. They feed on mulberry leaves and consume a large amount of these leaves for around 30 days before going to the next stage. The third stage is cocoon. In this stage, silkworm spins a protective cocoon around itself. It is the size of a small cotton ball and is made of a single thread of silk. The fourth stage is pupa. The pupa stage is motionless stage. In this stage, people kill the pupa by plugging the cocoon into boiling water and unwind the silk thread. The last but not the least is moth. In this stage, the pupa changes into adult moth. The female moth lays eggs after mating and thus the life cycle of silkworm begins. Processing of silk. Extracting silk from cocoon is known as the processing of silk. Silk is separated from cocoon by exposing to sunlight. After that, reeling of silk is done. The process of unwinding silk from cocoon, this silk thread is then bleached. The silk fiber is then spun into silk threads. Now, let's discuss the loans and subsidy for silkworm rearing. To promote and to boost the industry of sericulture and to provide encouragement to the farmers, NABARD improving loans to the farmers and individuals who are eligible for the loan. To get the loan sanctioned by NABARD, the first thing you need to do is to visit a bank in your locality and get all the formalities of the loan done. Financial bodies such as banks give loans to the farmers or individual in this way with the support of NABARD. For other loans and subsidies, you can visit nearest department, Sericulture department or Agriculture department for more information. That's all folks for today. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe to this channel, and please ring the bell button to notify you whenever new video is uploaded. Thank you for watching.